Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are trying something a little bit different. We've got a new kind of episode here for you on the show today. This is we're going to call it the One and Done Midseason Strategy Show. And what I mean by that is we are going to talk about golf one and done here on this show. We're going to talk about the next three tournaments because the next three tournaments, the Memorial Tournament, the U.S. Open, and the Travelers Championship. These are the three tournaments that are going to be super pivotal, super vital in terms of winning your season-long golf. One and done. Pretty much you've got signature event, major signature event, where there is going to be a ton of money up for grabs. There's going to be the best players in the world all coming to these events. And so there's going to be a lot of strategy and a lot of thinking that goes behind getting these picks right. Because if you're at the top of the leaderboard and you're one and done right now, you have to make sure you do something to maintain that lead. If you are in the middle of the pack, it's time to make the push up to the front. And if you're the back of the pack, this is really your last opportunity to gain a lot of ground as we head towards the end of the season, because after the Travelers Championship, there is no signature events. There's the Open Championship, and then there's a lot of kind of middling events, and then there is the FedEx Cup playoffs where you get two, maybe three big time payday events. So really, a lot of the one and done season hinges on these three events. So what we're going to do here on this episode is we're going to tell you guys how you should be picking, or more specifically, how you should be thinking if you are at the front, middle, or back of your one and done, and who are some guys that make sense as good picks for a golf one and done for these three courses: for the Memorial Tournament, the U.S. Open, and the Travelers Championship. Now, we will still have our full previews for all three of these tournaments coming out on the week of those tournaments as well. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so that way you can get notified when those episodes drop, and you can join us for our full previews for those three tournaments. But we're basically going to take what would be the one and done segment on all three of those tournaments and put it all here on this episode and talk about a lot of big time strategy when it comes to one and done here today. So that way, kind of it's a little bit more cohesive, in my opinion, to talk about these three events as opposed to just doing one and done each week as it goes. So if you like what you see here in this episode, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. But more importantly, like I said, subscribe and come back for the full previews for each of these 3 weeks where we're going to talk DFS, bets, and otherwise. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to go event by event. So the first event we are going to break down is the Memorial. So with the Memorial Tournament being a signature event, we are seeing a situation where all the best players on the PGA Tour pretty much are showing up to this in order to play in a pretty nice payday. This is the last signature event that is not a guaranteed paycheck. However, this event does have a cut after Friday where it will be the top 50 in ties out of like 70 or so players. So really, in terms of a one and done perspective, what you cannot afford to do is pick a guy who ends up missing that cut and get you $0 from a signature event. That would be like an absolute catastrophe. So I don't think that this is the week where you want to get super duper cute with your pick. Like, I think you want to pick somebody that makes a lot of sense, somebody who's in good form. Even if you are near the back of the leaderboard and you're one and done, I think you can still do that this week, right? So anyway, what I wanted to look at was just who in this field is currently playing the best. And it should come as no surprise that the top three in this field in terms of strokes gained total in 2024 are Scheffler, Schauffele, and McIlroy. Like that's absolutely no shocker. Now, in terms of how we can kind of glean a little bit of a course fit, let's take a look and see if there's anything. What I think is a pretty good correlation to this is looking at Jack Nicklaus course, because Muirfield Village is a Jack Nicklaus design, and other guys who tend to play Jack Nicklaus courses pretty well tend to play well here in Muirfield Village, right? You saw a lot of crossover at Valhalla, which was a Jack Nicklaus design, with Muirfield Village. What we've seen in a lot of Muirfield Village leaderboards over the years. So the top 10 guys at Jack Nicklaus courses in the last 5 years are Scheffler, Cantlay, Morikawa, McIlroy, Schauffele, Lowry, Finau, Henley, Fitzpatrick, and Homa. I think that's a pretty doggone good list to pick from, if I'm being totally honest. Now, if If we were to reset filter though, Muirfield Village is a long and difficult golf course. So if we were to just filter out scoring conditions to, above average difficulty, length to above average length, who are the guys that tend to play long and difficult golf courses very well? You're going to see some of the same names pop up. It's McIlroy, Scheffler, Schauffele, Fitzpatrick, Matsuyama, Hovland, Zalatoris, Connors, Morikawa, and Fleetwood as the top 10. So I do think that's a decent list to go by as well. Now, if we were to just kind of, look at just this course history though. So who are guys that just play well at Muirfield Village? Well, I think you're going to see some similar names again, but it'll also be some different ones. Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantlay, Siwoo Kim, Jordan Spieth, Max Homa as the top 5, Morikawa, Schauffele, Zalatoris, Schenk, and McIlroy rounding out the top 10, with Fitzpatrick, Finau, McCarthy, Day, and Hodges as the top 15. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, this is an absolutely insane stat. I'm going to pull a different website if you're watching here on YouTube to pull it up. But Scotty Scheffler at the Memorial last year did something that is almost entirely unprecedented. So at the Memorial last season, Scotty Scheffler gained about, let me do some quick math here, almost 20 strokes tee to green. Yeah, almost 20 strokes tee to green, and lost 8 of it with the putter. If he was a neutral putter, he would have won that tournament by 5 shots because he was third place anyway, just out of the playoff between Hovland and McCarthy. So Scotty Scheffler last year was just absolutely insane at this course, tee to green. And I think that there's absolutely a chance that he does that again, because that's pretty much what he does every week now, except what you look at with Scotty this season, he has not lost strokes with the putter since Bay Hill. So, it would stand to reason that if Scotty plays the same way tee to green this year that he did at the Memorial Tournament last year, he's going to win this tournament going away. That's absolutely a possibility this week. He is that good. But to go back to the full list, I think when you just look at, guys who you can play this week, I think that lists or just all those names that we talked about, I think that's a pretty good starting point if we're being honest. So I would tend to look at just any name that we've said so far. But what I do think is super important is I do think that it really matters to play your position in a one and done. And I do think the ownership matters in a one and done. So what you're looking at right now is I am in a 150 person one and done on Fantasy Golf World Championships. I have been picking this one and done throughout the season on all of my weekly previews, and I'm currently in 30th place out of 150. I am just out of the money, but I'm in a position that I kind of like being in because right now I have not used Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Wyndham Clark, Victor Hovland, Ludwig Oberg, Patrick Cantlay, or Colin Morikawa. So out of the 9 guys in the top of the official world golf ranking, one of which is number 7, John Rahm. I have not picked 8 of them. The only one I've picked is Rory McIlroy, and he won at the Wells Fargo Championship. I love that. Like that's an absolutely great position to be in. However, I'm kind of running out of events to use these guys in. As we mentioned, there are, a signature event, major signature event coming up, followed by another major at the Open Championship, followed by 2 more FedEx Cup playoff events. So I don't really have a whole lot of time left to use these guys, and I need to look for opportunities to use them whenever I can. But what's interesting is the longer you save these guys over the course of the season, the more you end up losing them or using them in a high leverage situation. So think about Scotty Scheffler right now. Scotty Scheffler is available to only 27% of people that are in this one and done that I am in. And if you're in the 73% that's used him, you probably got a win out of Scotty. But like now the 27% of us that are left, if we use Scotty and get that win, we're going to gain ground on everybody else because they're not going to have access to him if he does that. So the question becomes is when and where do you decide to use Scotty if you have him left? And like we kind of just talked about, I think the Memorial Tournament is a great spot to use Scotty if you have him available. I think that the Memorial Tournament is a great spot to use Xander Schauffele if you still have him available. 34% of this one and done has Xander Schauffele available. He's just coming off of the win at the PGA Championship, which was also a Jack Nicklaus design. He was runner-up at Wells Fargo. So he's playing some really good golf. He's got just such a well-rounded game that Xander can translate to any golf course. And I don't think that There's a lot of guys in the PGA Tour that I don't think are built to win back-to-back events just because it's such a big deal to them, or whatever happens mentally, whatever happens in terms of preparation, it's hard to win back to back. And Xander's done that before. He won the Travelers and then the Scottish Open in back to back starts. So I do think that there's a possibility that Xander could go back to back at Memorial. I think that both of them make for very solid options. I think that Rory McIlroy, who's also only available 27% of this one and done, make for very solid options. So I say all that to say, if you have one of these big three guys available, you either need to A, use them this week at the Memorial, or B, have somewhere very specific in mind that is either a signature event or a major down the road to use them in. So for instance, we're going to talk about the US Open and the Travelers Championship. A few of these guys I like at both of those places. So if you're passing on them this week, make sure you have a designated spot to use them somewhere down the line. There's so little events left. There we go. That was worded better. There's so little events left in the season that you can sit down with a calendar and plan out who you're going to use which event. And I think that if you have any of these three guys available, you need to be doing that for them because they're very clearly above the rest of the PGA Tour in terms of their utility week in and week out. Now, if you're at the top of the board and you're one and done, the guy that I think is going to be the most chalky selection in one and done this week is Viktor Hovland. He's available in 73% of the league that I am in, which is quite high. But if you also look at his finishes in this calendar year, Viktor hasn't really been all that great. So it's not shocking that he's, hasn't been used by a whole lot of people because he just hasn't really been all that good, hasn't really been a guy that people want to use, right? But he really did start to turn around. He turned it around on the weekend at Wells Fargo, played supremely well at the PGA Championship, which again was also a Jack Nicklaus design. And oh, by the way, he is the defending champion here at this event. So I do think that this is a great spot for Viktor Hovland. I think that with the amount of people who have not used him yet, Viktor Hovland is going to be the chalky one and done selection this week. So if you are front running, just go ahead and load up Viktor Hovland and you can feel pretty comfortable with that. The other two guys that I think are going to be pretty chalky are Patrick Cantlay and Collin Morikawa. Patrick Cantlay has one of the best histories at Muirfield Village as literally anybody on the entire PGA Tour for any course. Like we're talking like Rory at Quail Hollow, we're talking John Rahm at Torrey Pines. Like this is just elite level course history stuff out of Patrick Cantlay. He won this event in 2019. He won it in 2021, and he's got numerous other top 10 finishes. Cantlay's game is not in a great spot coming in, but he's another guy kind of like Xander Schauffele, who he just has this well-rounded game, and for whatever reason, it all seems to show up at Muirfield Village. So if he's just able to be, normal Patrick Cantlay at Muirfield Village, he should end up being a pretty solid pick this week as well. But what I worry about, though, like I said, I think he's the chalky pick, is if you don't use Cantlay this week, where else are you going to use it? There's not really a supernatural fit for him. He generally plays his best golf in the state of California and at this tournament, of which there are no more tournaments in California on the schedule. So maybe if you're not using Cantlay this week and you have him available, it might be a situation where you're just looking for his form to improve before you end up using Patrick Cantlay. I think that's not a solid or not a bad option as well. Collin Morikawa, I think, is probably going to be the third chalky option this week. He's coming in off back-to-back fourth place finishes, and he does have a win at the Workday Charity Open at this course. He was runner-up to Patrick Cantlay in 2021. If you remember, that was the tournament where John Rahm was beating everybody by like 5 shots and then got COVID. And so really you probably consider that a third place out of Morikawa, but that's beside the point. He's playing great golf. His approach play has really turned around recently. He's great at Jack Nicklaus courses, as evidenced by that finish at the PGA, as evidenced by his win at the Concession when the WGC had a tournament there, and his win at this course under the name of a different tournament. So Collin Morikawa, elite option this week as well. So I really think that if you're near the top, be conservative. Hovland, Cantlay, Morikawa, those are the three guys you can go with this week. If you're not able to use one of the big three, which if we're being honest, if you're near the top, you're one in probably have used one of the big three, Scheffler, Schauffele, McIlroy. So if you're chasing this week, who can you go with? Well, Max Homa has been used by a lot of people, and kind of like Patrick Cantlay, he plays his best golf in the state of California. And there ain't no more tournaments in California. So Max Homa is not in the best form coming in. He was great at the Masters, was a big time letdown at the Heritage, great at Wells Fargo, but kind of a letdown in the 2 tournaments since. But his history at this event has been pretty solid. He's been 5th and 6th in the last 2 times that he has shown up to Muirfield Village. I don't think he is a bad option at all if you are chasing. Also, Matt Fitzpatrick showed up on a lot of the metrics that we were looking at. Plays long and difficult golf course as well, has been good at this course. And really, unless you're going to save him for the Scottish Open or the Open Championship, there's not really a natural fit for Matt Fitzpatrick coming up. If you question his form coming in, I think that's a valid concern, but his history here at this course speaks for itself. I think if you're chasing, he's absolutely got to be on the table as an option. I feel the same way about Justin Thomas. I feel the same way about Tony Finau. I think that Thomas doesn't really have a supernatural spot on the rest of the schedule. Maybe TPC Southwind. Tony Finau does have a win at the Rocket Mortgage and a win at the 3M Open, so there maybe are some natural, spots to save him at. Jordan Spieth has a great history at this event, and there's nowhere really to save him for. He's won the Travelers before, he's won a U.S. Open before, but I don't really think that there's a super great spot for Spieth remaining on the schedule. And if you want to question his form coming in, I think that's valid also. So maybe he might be a little bit of a stay away, but that's also a guy that you're probably going to get at like next to 0 ownership. Now, a guy that's like super under the radar that I want to talk about, it's 2 more names, and then we're going to move on to the U.S. Open. The super under the radar name that I want to talk about is Benny On. So Benny On was a runner-up at this tournament back in 2018. He has missed 3 cuts at this event in between now and then, but he also owns 4 more top 25 finishes here at this tournament. Benny On is also like a captain of Team No Putt. And what I mean by that is like he's generally got a great tee to green game and is generally not good with the putter, and when the putter does show up, you get pop finishes like what you had at Wells Fargo. But like you look at what he's done in the ball striking categories, he has gained strokes in both off the tee and on approach in 6 straight tournaments. That is quite impressive. And when the putter cooperates, he generally has a very good finish. And at this course, his tee to green game has been there historically, and the putter has not been as bad at this place as it has been at other places. So I think that Benny On would be like a super sneaky one and done pick this week. The last sneaky one and done pick that I do want to talk about is going to be Will Zalatoris. So he has only played this event 1 time, came in, or actually 1 time as a professional, I should say. He came in 5th place in that event. Will Zalatoris, when you think about what he's done throughout his entire career, he's been great at majors. He's been great at long and difficult golf courses. Well, this is a golf course that is going to be major-like conditions. It is going to be long and difficult. I think he is a super sneaky under the radar play here at the Memorial. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to talk U.S. Open. All right, if you're watching YouTube, apologies for the camera difficulties right there, but we're going to go ahead and pick back up. We're going to start talking about Pinehurst. So what's really interesting about the U.S. Open from a one-and-done perspective is the fact that live golfers end up in the fold. Right. So basically, with all the live golfers, I'm talking Rahm, Koepka, DeChambeau, Cam Smith, Joaquin Niemann, Tyrrell Hatton, and everybody else. You only have 4 opportunities to use them throughout the season, with it being the 4 major championships. If I'm being honest, though, last season it was super optimal to use live guys at the majors if you were able to find the right ones, right? Obviously Brooks Koepka was runner-up at the Masters and won the PGA Championship. So if you used him at either of those, you were getting a big-time payday. And then at the U.S. Open, Dustin Johnson, Cam Smith, Bryson DeChambeau all had very respectable finishes. So really last year, it was looking like a move to always use the live guys at the majors, right, to make sure you could use them. This year, it has not gone as well for the live guys at the majors. Tyrrell Hatton was pretty good at the Masters, as was Bryson DeChambeau. DeChambeau was really good at the PGA, but like if you didn't use either of those 2 guys, like DJ was awful. Koepka has not been good. Rahm has been a disappointment at both those tournaments. Cam Smith had a good running at the Masters, but was okay at the PGA. Joaquin Niemann, not great at either of them. So like they've been supremely disappointing at the majors so far. And so really it begs the question of, at the U.S. Open, are you going to use a live guy or are you going to use one of the PGA Tour guys? So the big strategy discussion here is I think it comes down to mapping the rest of season. You are somebody who has been super aggressive so far throughout this one and done season, and you don't have a whole lot of guys left for these PGA Tour events, then you probably need to consider using some live guys at the remaining 2 majors. The one thing I will say though is that throughout the summer, after the Travelers Championship, where you get the run of Rocket Mortgage, John Deere Classic, 3M, Wyndham, those type of events, you don't get the strongest fields at those events. You're not going to get like the top tier best players in the world at those events. So I do think that, if you have a lot of like mid-tier options left, that would probably be more what I would be looking at as opposed to the top tier options, right? Because like we said earlier, you get these 2 signature events and majors sandwiched together. You get another major, you get another 2 FedEx Cup playoff events. Those are your last opportunities to use your absolute big guns. So like I said, map it all out, see who you have left, see who you can use for the remainder of the season. And that should be your determining factor if you're going to pick a live guy for this major or not. If you were going to pick a live player for this major, think about what we know about Pinehurst. So I'm going to have a big preview on Pinehurst coming out next week, but Pinehurst is a course that is going to require supreme precision on the second shot and on and around the greens. The greens at Pinehurst are going to be probably the most difficult green complexes that you're going to see on the PGA Tour. They look like kind of like if you were to take a Lay's potato chip and put it flat on the ground and like make a green out of it. Like there's just these incredible curves and humps and the hollows off the green. Some of them are like an upside down bowl almost, where you have to sit it on the green or else it's going to roll off. Like these green complexes are going to be supremely difficult. It's not a difficult off the tee course though. So it's going to be a course that's going to put a lot of emphasis on approach play, around the green play, and putting. And when it comes to that around the green play, it's all this like shaved short grass area. Like it's not going to be chipping out of thick rough. So the Texas wedge putting off of the green is going to be an option as well. So one thing I'm going to look at for that field is I'm going to look at what short game stats look like at other courses with this feature, like Riviera, like Memorial Park, like St. Andrews for the Open Championship a few years back, like Augusta National. I'm going to be looking at that big time. But in terms of just what we know about everybody coming into this field, I really think that it sets up for all the live guys. It sets up the best for Bryson DeChambeau, and I think it sets up the best for Cam Smith. The reason why Bryson DeChambeau is going to have a huge edge with his distance, because he's still going to be able to hit a lot of fairways with as far as he hits the ball. These are some pretty generous fairways on a lot of holes. He's generally at his best where he doesn't have to depend on his driver. It's why he was decent at LACC last year, because it wasn't just a super heavy emphasis on long, inaccurate driving of the golf ball. So Cam Smith, with his ability to get supremely hot on approach and with the putter, I think it sets up a lot better for Cam Smith than it does for any of the other live guys. Now, his performances in majors and on live have left a little bit to be desired. He ranks 36th in Data Golf's worldwide rankings right now, but I do think that it's as good of a spot for Cam Smith as you're going to get on the schedule. So if you're looking to use a live guy, I prefer to use Bryson or Cam Smith. I don't think that it's a great setup for Rahm or Neiman, because they generally hit a low arcing ball flight. Rahm's short game is not great on this type of surface. I don't think it shapes up all that well for them. And Koepka, just this season, he's been a little bit lackluster. Just as much as I generally always want to play Brooks Koepka at the majors, I really was looking for a better performance out of him at the PGA Championship. So that's what we know about Pinehurst, and that's what we know about the live guys. Now, in terms of a PGA Tour perspective, if you're going to play anybody from the PGA Tour that week, I think it's got to be Scotty Scheffler. I just think it's got to be. I will tell everybody who will listen to me, I think Scotty Scheffler is going to win this U.S. Open by 5 shots. I think he is going to boat race everybody. And so in terms of me picking for my one and done, for the one and done that we talked about earlier, I am probably going to be picking Scotty Scheffler at the U.S. Open at Pinehurst. Scotty Scheffler is not only a super precise hitter of the golf ball at all levels, from driver, irons, wedges on down, but he's also one of the best course managers in the entire world. He knows where to miss. He knows where to leave himself. And at Pinehurst, there's going to be places where if you miss the green, it's going to be like an automatic bogey. You're just not going to be able to get the ball close to the hole on your chip. And so Scotty is not going to leave himself in those positions. Scotty also has a world-class short game, if not the best in the world short game. And it's very good off of tight lies. And so I really think that if there were a course that you could build for Scotty Scheffler, I think that Pinehurst would be it. Scotty Scheffler is going to be my one and done pick that week. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, well, Mike, what do I do if I've already used Bryson? I've already used Scotty. I've already used Brooks Koepka. I don't really know what to do for the U.S. Open. Well, what I would do is I would consider looking back at 2022 Open Championship at St. Andrews. I would look back at other major championships and look who has finished well at those events. I think that Pinehurst at the end of the day would be a pretty good course for Xander Schauffele as well. I also think that Collin Morikawa, with his kind of uncharacteristically good performances in majors, I think that it's a pretty good course for him as well. He's going to find a lot of fairways. He can be really dialed in with his irons, and I think that's going to be a way that you're really going to be able to separate yourself at Pinehurst is with your irons and with your short game as opposed to off the tee. I don't see this guy winning this tournament, but I don't think that it's a bad Tommy Fleetwood course. I don't think it's a bad Tyrrell Hatton course. I think it's a really good Justin Thomas course because of how good he is at chipping off of tight lies. So those will be some names that I would be considering for the U.S. Open if I were to not have Scotty Scheffler or one of the top 11 guys. Those would be the guys that I would be considering for that tournament. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to close this thing out by talking about the Travelers Championship. So an interesting wrinkle about the Travelers Championship is that with it being the signature event that's taking place right after the U.S. Open and right after the Memorial Tournament, it's going to be like 95% the same field that you're going to see at the Memorial Tournament. So if you have access to a data site like a Rick Run Good or Fantasy National, or I use the Rabbit Hole by BetSperts Golf, or Bet the Number is another one that's up and coming. If you have access to one of those data sites and they already have the field loaded in for the Memorial Tournament, you can pretty much go ahead and get ready for the Travelers Championship because it's pretty much going to be the same field. I'm just going to be looking at some slightly different stats, slightly different characteristics. So we're going to go into more detailed breakdown the week of for the Travelers Championship. But what we know about the Travelers is it's played at TPC River Highlands, which is a short, very tight, very finesse par 70 in the Northeast that was designed by Pete Dye. So we're going to look through a few characteristics and see if we can find some names that are going to be guys that might pop at this course. So if you look for the last 2 years, guys who played the best golf at short golf courses, the top 10 is Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Ludwig Oberg, Russell Henley, Justin Thomas, Wyndham Clark, Sahith Theegala, Brian Harman, JT Poston, and Eric Cole. And if we were to change that up just ever so slightly and switch it up to just par 70s, because it's a different mindset when you play a par 70. You don't have a whole lot of par 5s you can depend on. So if you switch it up and just look at par 70s, the top 10 changes to McIlroy, Scheffler, Schauffele, Hovland, Henley, Cantlay, Morikawa, Wyndham Clark, Keegan Bradley, and Tom Kim, with Andrew Putnam, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Shane Lowry sitting just on the outside looking in. Now, what you're also going to see, because I'm going to change up one thing real quick, is that with this being a Pete Dye course, guys who play Pete Dye courses tend to end up playing pretty well here at TPC River Highlands. And so when you look at the last, let's make it last 5 years. The last 5 years at Pete Dye courses, the best in the business end up being Scotty Scheffler. No surprise. It's Sawgrass and Harbor Town where he's won multiple times. Well, won 3 total with those 2. Scotty Scheffler, Brian Harman, Xander Schauffele, Patrick Cantlay, Sungjae Im, Justin Thomas, Matt Fitzpatrick, Corey Connors, Christian Bezuidenhout, and Tony Finau as the top 10. So those are all names that I'm going to be considering. But also, 2 more things I'm going to look at. What if we just make the Northeast United States? Because you're going to see the same type of agronomy same type of weather and kind of conditions. If you look at just the Northeast United States over the last 5 years, the tops in the field are Scheffler, Schauffele, Cantlay, McIlroy, Zalatoris, Matsuyama, Keegan Bradley, Victor Hovland, Alex Noren, and Corey Connors, with Brian Harman and Justin Thomas just on the outside looking in. Last one that we're going to do, if you just look at TPC River Highlands, who are the top in the field. So in terms of course history at TPC River Highlands in the last 5 years, you've got Xander Schauffele, Brian Harman, Patrick Cantlay, Keegan Bradley, Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, Hideki Matsuyama, Sahith Theegala, Harris English, and JT Poston as the top 10, with Victor Hovland, Sam Burns, Corey Connors, Eric Cole, and Jason Day rounding out the top 15. So anyway, is there anything we can gain from that? I do think there's a little bit that we can gain from that, right? So basically, what's interesting about the Travelers Championship at TPC River Highlands is, in my opinion, it brings more guys into play. With it being a short golf course, with it being a much more finesse golf course, you don't see the skills that are possessed by a lot of the best golfers in the world used as the skills to separate themselves from the rest of the field. So like when you think of a course like, let's just say Augusta National, what does Augusta National require to do really well? Well, you're going to be hitting a lot of mid and long irons into really firm and fast greens. And the short game is going to be really difficult with really difficult green complexes, right? So the best players in the world are going to get an advantage by being long off the tee because they will have a less club in. They're going to have an advantage because the best players in the world are generally the best at mid to long irons, specifically long irons. And they're generally going to have an advantage because generally the best players in the world have a great short game, right? Especially when you think of the likes of like Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Wyndham Clark, like that type of player, right? So when you look at TPC River Highlands, with it being a shorter course, with it being a course where there's a lot more finesse required, the best players in the world aren't going to really be able to separate using what they normally use to separate. So it's going to be a lot of wedges and short irons into greens, and you're going to have to hit those greens because you're going to have to make birdie putts if you want to contend. If you're relying on your short game in a tournament like the Travelers Championship, it's not going to likely end well for you. So the Travelers Championship is a place that I would not want to play the likes of a Scotty Scheffler or Rory McIlroy or a Wyndham Clark or a Victor Hovland or even a Ludwig Oberg, right? I would want to play maybe from the top of the board. I could see myself playing Xander Schauffele because he has won this event before. But I do think that if you have Xander remaining, it's not a bad idea to hold Xander for a FedEx Cup playoff event, or maybe even the Open Championship. Like Xander's game is so well-rounded, he can be used at any course. That Xander is a guy that I love to hold for as long as possible. Anecdotally, last year I was in a one and done similar to this size, and I got to the very end. And at TPC Southwind and at Olympia Fields, the two golfers that I just had left that were near the top of the board were Xander Schauffele and Scotty Scheffler, because they just have such this like one size fits all golf game that you can play them legitimately anywhere and feel comfortable with it, because they just don't really have courses that they play poorly at, right? So if you're wanting to save, one of these two guys for the unknown course at the BMW Championship that we know very little about, I believe Castle Pines, something like that. Castle Pines, I think is what it is. If you want to save one of those guys for that course, I think that's a very solid decision. But if not, Xander, I think, makes a lot of sense at the Travelers. If you're going to play any of the big dogs at the Travelers, it would definitely be Xander Schauffele, because he has multiple ways of separating his game as opposed to the other guys near the top. Now, if you're near the top, you're one and done. Who do I think is going to be pretty chalky at Travelers? Well, in terms of course history, the Travelers, Brian Harman is like the course history king. He's like the short course king, which no pun intended, because he's a short king himself. Dude's like 5'5". Well, I stand corrected. Maybe he's a little taller than 5'5", but when he's on TV, he looks like he's about 5'5". So Brian Harman at a short golf course where he's got pretty good form coming in, especially depending on how the next 2 weeks go. If he continues to show good form, I think Brian Harman will be a very chalky pick. I think Keegan Bradley will be a very chalky pick as well. He is the defending champ at the Travelers, played really well at Colonial, was runner-up at Colonial. Even though he never really had a chance to win that event, he still ended up tied for second, and generally plays super well in the American Northeast. And the Travelers Championship is going to be kind of the last opportunity you're going to have to play him in the Northeast. So Harmon and Bradley are going to be likely your two chalk guys. Sahith Theegala has been used by quite a bit of the field so far, but I think he's a pretty solid choice there as well. He finished runner up to Xander when he won it in 2022. And sometimes, guys kind of just latch onto like one decent bit of course history. Another guy who plays short course as well is Russell Henley. I think that he is not a bad option at the Travelers. However, if you look further down the road, Wyndham is a supreme option for Russell Henley. He's got a great history at the Wyndham Championship, great history in the American Southeast in general. And he's having one of the best approach years out of anybody on the PGA Tour not named Scheffler or Finau or Lowry or Schauffele. And so really think that he's a really solid choice at either the Travelers or the Wyndham down the road. So Russell Henley would be a guy that I would certainly be considering. If you're looking to get a little bit different at the Travelers, again, this is a course where you can play a lot of different guys and feel good about it. Tom Kim is a guy who is coming in and starting to really rev up his form a little bit. Top 30 at the PGA and the Charles Schwab, and then very good finish at the RBC Canadian Open. Plays well at short courses, plays well at par 70s. So Tom Kim, I do not think is that bad of an option. Chris Kirk is another guy who tends to play short courses and par 70s quite well. However, his recent form coming in leaves a little bit to be desired. But he's going to have a few opportunities at the Memorial and at the U.S. Open to turn it around. So with this tournament being 3 weeks from now, it's really hard for me to project who's going to be playing well and who's not going to be playing well. But, the recent form coming in can certainly change in the next 2 weeks. Another guy that I do want to talk about is Harris English. I think he can be a little bit of an off the board pick. If you're looking at the Travelers, he won the event in 2021. He won like a 7-hole playoff against Kramer Hickok, if my memory serves me correctly. Another guy who tends to play short par 70s very well. So Harris English would be a guy that I would consider also if I was chasing in my one and done. But like I said from the start for this event, this is an event where no matter where I'm at on the leaderboard, I'm not going to play one of the top dogs. I'm probably going to wait a little bit before I make an official pick and see where the recent form lies coming in for some of these guys that are further down the board. But like I said, I certainly anticipate that Harmon and Bradley are going to be the chalky selections. In terms of other guys near the top, if you're just sitting here like, well, Mike, it's a signature event. I want to use the best players in the world at a signature event. If you have either Cantlay or Morikawa left after the U.S. Open, I think that both of them are very solid choices for the Travelers Championship. Just Morikawa, just because of how good of a precision player he is. Cantlay has a decent history at that event. And really, there's nowhere supernatural to use the two of them after that. And maybe, like I said earlier with Cantlay, if you want to see if the form turns around before you use him at Travelers, I think that's a pretty viable strategy also. All right, so that does it. We've talked about the 3 big events, the 3 big money makers for one and dones here, that are sitting here for the next part of the season. So hopefully we're able to give you guys plenty of good information, plenty of good strategy and good tidbits to kind of help you determine who you need to be picking and how you need to be planning out the rest of your one and done season. Like we said, it's really coming up fast, y'all, because if you're sitting there behind, these 3 events are where you need to make your hay, where you need to get yourself back in it. So that way, when the Open Championship and the FedEx Cup playoffs do turn around, you can end up, finally staying near the top of the leaderboard and cashing in. But like I said, I would not want to be sitting near the back of the leaderboard after these 3 events, because these 3 events are really the main opportunities left that you have to move the needle. So you really want to make sure you're getting these 3 events right. And hopefully I gave you guys plenty of ammunition to help get those 3 events right here on this episode. So if you like what you saw here on YouTube today, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out a ton. You guys do that. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. But more importantly, come back with us tomorrow night. We're going to have our full preview for the Memorial. Next week, we're going to have full preview for Pinehurst for the U.S. Open, followed by the preview for the Travelers Championship. We're going to have weekly golf content, y'all. So in addition to that, we're also going to have some college football, college basketball, NFL best ball content coming your way as well. So if you're subscribed, you will get all of that. But like I said, hopefully I was able to help give you guys plenty of good information, help you win your one and dones this year. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you in those one and dones. Hopefully you're able to cash in on these 3 weeks. Thank you guys for watching and listening.